Hello, everybody. I am George Cow and really excited because this is the first ever recording session for the Mindful Politics podcast. Now, some of you have probably heard an episode or two before this. If you know, by assuming I have, looking into the future, I have probably recorded some kind of intro episode or two. But this is the first time, chronologically, I'm actually recording a session. I've got two of my friends with me here, which I'll introduce them, or I'll let them introduce themselves soon. But before we get into it, I want to remind everybody here what mindful politics is about. And so I'm just going to read the mission statement of this podcast. And as I read it, I invite you to reflect on it and see if you have anything you want to add or just reflections on it. Now, this is the first time I'm actually reading it out on a recording. So, so here goes. The typical political conversation is often callous towards the opposing side, seeing that side as those people as stupid or immoral or both, right? While painting our side as smart and principled. And this is true whether if you're talking about, American politics, how the Democrats see the Republicans or vice versa, and et cetera. So the aim of mindful politics is to provide an alternative that uplifts the audience and brings a deeper understanding to one another and innovation, hopefully, to political dialogue. And because the reason I started this is because I didn't see this done enough. I mean, every single time I listen to a political conversation, it's always everyone is smarter than everyone else in the room. Or if they're not, they just stay quiet and they're not open to learning and compassionate inquiry. It's like if I think you're wrong, I'm just going to tell. So of course it's helpful for political shows because that's exciting. It's good TV, right? Or it's good podcast listening to have acerbic debates, right? But I want to do something different here. I want to model a political conversation. I want us to do that aims for compassionate learning about the most popular political issues, which is going to be challenging, which you'll hear coming up in upcoming episodes, so that we can all be wiser. That's the key. We can all be wiser in our activism and our voting, right? So the common question is, isn't this too slow? We have serious issues to figure out, to vote on, etc. Well, my viewpoint about this is that look at politics, look at how it's been for decades in America, hundreds of years, and thousands of years everywhere. Decade after decade, we just keep opposing each other, and we just keep using the same sort of mindset, heart set to approach it, which is I'm right, you're wrong. Let me show how wrong you are, so that everyone can see how dumb or immoral your side is, so that I can get my policies voted into place. And of course, I come from I'm influenced a little bit by Taoist principles, which is the stronger a force, the stronger the opposing force ends up being. It's just the natural laws. So can we find a way to kind of Aikido our way into, I don't know if Aikido is even the right analogy, but can we find a way of togetherness where every stakeholder can feel cared for? So that's my hope. And I would love to introduce very briefly here, and I'll let them introduce themselves. I'm just going to bring them on the screen here. Mara Clear Spring and Dylan Newcomb, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your bravery in showing up for this kind of conversation, and just for your compassion and being willing to have it. So I'll just have each of you say hello briefly, because you'll be telling your stories. So go ahead and unmute and say hello. Yeah, Dylan.
Hello.
Yeah,
Hi.
good to have you here.
I'm
Thank you for
Dylan.
being here. Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted, honored, and a little bit nervous to be here.
Yeah, me too, for sure. Mara, thank you. And how about you, Mara?
Yes, I'm Mara, and I'm amazed that I'm sitting here because this is like, as I was describing to my friend Gail, anti-Mara. I don't do political things. So this is going to be very different for me. And I think I'll just join you guys in the I'm Nervous Too club.
Yeah. This is thank you. Thank you both for being here, because I invited quite a few, not that many people actually. I invited a handful of, there was less than 10 people that I invited. And I was surprised that at least maybe half of them, and these were thoughtful invitations. These were people I handpicked that I thought, I think they'll have something to say about this, and I think they'll say it in a way that does embrace the values of the, and half of them declined, saying that I don't want to get into this kind of conversation publicly. So that's why I'm especially appreciative that you're here. So what I'd like to do now is to give us a few minutes to tell our own stories in terms of how we relate to politics. And maybe there's a highlight or two or three from our life that influenced us in how we think about politics. And the key here is how we think about politics, especially in the context of the show. It's not right or better than anyone else's. Maybe objectively it might be, okay. But in the context of this show, we are here to learn from each other. So with compassionate listening and inquiry, let's go and give this a try. So the format will be, each of us gets 3 minutes to share any highlights we want about our own political journey, and then 1 minute from the others here to reflect back anything or ask any questions, things like that. So I'm looking forward to this. I will go first, so you can kind of see how this might work, and I will set a timer for myself. So here we go. All right. I grew up in an apolitical family. It was actually quite interesting because I grew up in Taiwan, which has quite a strong political background. I mean, if you know anything about Taiwanese politics, I mean, just from the very founding of Taiwan, obviously, Taiwan's not that old. It's less than, I think it's less than 100 years old. I'm terrible about history too. But we never talked about it. Very interesting in our nuclear family or outside of the family, I mean, to extended family. Maybe we talked about it, just, and then we came to the States. We immigrated to the States in 1983. I still remember this, coming to the airport and seeing Reagan's picture welcoming me to America. We moved to Orange County, California, Southern California. Back then, maybe still is now, it was very conservative, Republican, evangelical Christian, Orange County. So that's how I was raised. I thought Democrats are evil, wrong. I don't know anything. I mean, I didn't even study this stuff. I just got that from the air, I guess. Maybe from school, maybe, teachers maybe even let that slip out every now and then. So that's what I knew. That's all I knew. I got converted to evangelical Christianity back in junior high or maybe elementary school, because just everyone who was around me in that area. So I thought abortion is evil, that's all I remember, actually. The only political issue I remember, because I never looked into that very much. Oh, abortion is evil. That's all I knew. And that Republicans are good. That's all I knew. I didn't know anything. Went to college, Berkeley, UC Berkeley, and got caught up in the politics there. I became Green Party, for crying out, swung all the way to the other side. I was going to rallies, and I voted for Nader back in 2000. Okay, no regrets, because Al Gore would have won California anyway. And then I volunteered for the Kerry campaign and then the Obama campaigns. So very much, and watch Trevor Noah and Seth Meyers, and very much progressive politics. AOC was my hero. In recent years, I became more libertarian, maybe as a business owner, something like I hate regulations and all that stuff. And I think some man-made regulations are ridiculous, bureaucratic. So I've become more libertarian. So last thing I'll say is now I'm confused. I'm just, because I still have a heart of progressive. I have progressive heart, but I've got a libertarian mind. I don't know what to do with that. And maybe spiritually, I'm an anarchist, perhaps, because of Leo Tolstoy, that kind of spiritual writing, spiritual political writing. So that's why decided to have these conversations because I don't know what to think. And I want to learn. I want to learn more from each of you. So there's my 3 minutes. I look forward to seeing if any of you have any reflections on that. So let's go into gallery view now. And either of you want to reflect on that or ask any questions, feel free. So right now, I'm going to set a 1-minute timer. This is still experimental, first time we're recording here. So let's see how it works. And audience, please give us feedback below, comment on this and give me feedback on the format of the show as well. So Dylan, I think you had something that you wanted to share.
Well, more ask it. As someone who I'll share the quick version of my story, soon. I've also gone through different phases of living in different parts of the world, different communities, and I noticed for myself that my social, every time that I make a shift geographically and or politically, it has huge ripple effects on the social fabric of my life. And I just was wondering if you could share a few of your thoughts or experiences about how that's impacted your social fabric.
Right. I appreciate that. I've avoided politics, talking about it with friends, to some degree. I mean, but I try to be just listening, and I do sometimes have passionate views, but I always, I think I've had this seed of like, I'm not really sure though, so that's anyway. But thank you for that question. Yeah. And Mara, what about you? Anything you want to ask or?
Well, I'm always delighted when I get to speak to somebody or have someone in my circle who comes from a family that immigrated to the United States, because that's one of our founding principles. We got that Statue of Liberty up there saying, yo, come on in. And so I just would ask you, what was your setup for you coming into the States? You were a kid, I think, but still, was there some anticipation that you had? Was there a story of the family about, wow, when we get to the States, this is what's going to happen for us? Was there a whole culture around that?
Yeah. No, we came to the States because supposedly there are more opportunities here. I think there is a mystique about the United States, at least back then with Taiwan, and just many Asian countries. Oh, Taiwan, or United States, land of opportunity, American dream, that kind of thing. I don't know if that's still true anymore. But certainly it's like, international, like learning English and all that stuff. So yeah. Well, thank you both for reflecting back some questions. So I'm excited now to hear from your stories. So let's see here. All right, Dylan, go ahead.
All right. So yeah, let's see. I was born in 71. My mother and my grandmother were part of the hippie movement then. My grandmother was reacting against the sort of wealthy upper class that she came from and sort of eschewed that. She grew up very upper class and just sort of cut that whole off and the whole money stream off and was just like, yuck. And raised my mother, dragging her to rallies. My mom was helping people dodge the draft in the Vietnam War and was just a rebel. And so I grew up in this very sort of rebellious hippie. My family, my mom. Anyway, 15 of us moved up to Maine when I was 5 years old to start an organic farm. So I grew up in a half renovated cow barn in Maine, doing the back to the land experiment. And on weekends going down to rallies, no nukes rallies, and all that kind of stuff. We were full on living the hippie life. And so there was just never any question that, Reagan was the source of evil back then. He was sort of evil incarnate. I remember being in the bathtub when we got the news and my mom just going, what is the world coming to? It's we are screwed. And I remember just thinking, oh my God. I grew up pretty much with the understanding and the assumption that power, money, and white men are really the principal drivers, for a lot of the suffering and imbalance in the world. And as a white man, or a white man in developing, I anticipated a lot of challenges for me in how to feel good about myself and how to, what is it to be a man? What is it to be white? What is it to not grow? I grew up on food stamps, but I grew up having wealthy ancestors. So it was an odd mix of things. I, however, was really interested in the arts. I went into the arts and then into psychology, and I've sort of managed to live most of my life in a kind of a politics isolated bubble of I'm going to live in the realm of human transformation. I'm going to follow politics, but I know I'm doing my part by contributing to pushing the boundaries of human transformation and helping people, and that's going to have my own sort of trickle down effect, as it were. And so why I said yes to this conversation is like, I'm feeling like I can no longer afford to sit on the sidelines and isolate myself as much. How can I lean into this? So I'm excited for this conversation, and I hope for me that there was something synchronistic about your invitation that is, I'm going to take it as the universe also kicking me in the butt a little bit to like get out of my comfort zone of saying that's not my area.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for
I
sharing.
can, I think probably my own
Yeah.
political specific views or something might unfold as we talk more.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Thank you. Thank you for that. Wow. Okay, so I'll start with my 1 minute reflections, and then I'll go to Mara here. So I think you've coined a wonderful term, Hubble. I think you mentioned, I think maybe you were going to say politically isolated bubble. I'm like, Hubble, that's brilliant. That's a new term. I like it. And wow, it's so cool that you have sort of like this, like this drastic history of the wealth and the food stamps, and like growing up as a white man, what does that mean? And this whole idea of trickle down transformation into the political sphere is really cool. I like that a lot. I feel like I've been trying to do that through, I guess, maybe entrepreneurship or something like that, helping people with that, or productivity even. It's like somehow if we all become more productive ourselves, somehow that helps the society's transformation. So I really value your story and your sharing. Looking forward to hearing more. So Mara, what about you?
Well, first of all, just general observation, and is of the three of us all seem to come from that root of, I really would like this world to be a better place, and I feel like it's my responsibility to contribute in some way, shape, or form. And so Dylan, I liked how in your story it was revealed that nurture, the culture you grew up in was so impactful on the choices you made as you grew older, and helped you develop that part of yourself that had that altruism toward, I'm a member of this society and I need to participate in a way that is, to the highest and best good of all. And that, I think, is something I wish more of us had been given as a kid, even if it wasn't a hippie commune, which is actually kind of cool.
It was super cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very grateful for my upbringing. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for
thanks
that.
for your reflections.
I just want to mention to those who are just listening to the podcast, I do recommend that you watch the video, there's a link below in the podcast episode to the video version of this, because you'll see in some parts of our video that there's a visual timer. I think it's being recorded. I'm not actually quite sure. And so I want to just, again, honor my guests for being so good with rolling with that, because they didn't know there was going to be a timer, and they're doing such a good job sticking to it. So thank you. All right. So now Mara, I'm losing track of what's going on.
Don't worry about it.
Here.
This is a whole new space you're holding, and I think you're doing a marvelous job. And Dylan and I are having fun. I can tell.
I know. I hope so. I hope so.
I honestly didn't know if I'd have fun or not, just because this, like I said, Auntie Mara, this is not how I usually roll.
Wow. And I appreciate so appreciate you being here. Well, so let's get this segment going. All right, Mara, please go ahead. Share your story with us.
Okay, so I am, oh, there's your timer. Okay. I am Mara Clear Spring Cook. I'm right here in San Diego. I'm one of those rare California born people. And I come from a very uninformed and somewhat impoverished background. So my family moved from LA to the San Fernando Valley when I was just under 2 years old, and that's when my sister was born. And pretty much just lived very kind of that typical family where there's alcoholism and there's rage and just a very broken up family, no closeness to relatives. I was envying Dylan's closeness with his relatives as he was speaking about his story. And being raised sort of like that fight or flight syndrome turned on all the time. So every year the neighborhood kept changing and became more, it became poorer. And I actually was in the minority. And it was hard for me because I was a smart kid in a school where there was just a lot of gangs and violence, and it didn't benefit you to stick out. So I tried very hard to be invisible. Didn't work out so well, and eventually I ended up in private school because my grandmother, thank goodness for her, found the money so that I could go to a private school and get out of that environment, and then I could flourish more. But at that point, I mean, I didn't think about college. I just thought about how do I get a job and get out of this neighborhood, and that was my political initiation, because it wasn't like there were people talking about being a Republican or being a Democrat. It was like, oh, I think there's beer on the train. You know, the guys are going to go down and steal a couple cases of bud off the train. Yeah. So this is that kind of that was like normal. It was normalized for me, this whole way of life. So when I finally get out on my own, have my own job, I go through all my adventures in life. I moved I registered Republican simply because my mother was registered Republican. And once I figured out, oh my gosh, I'm not Republican, I registered Democrat because I didn't understand any of the other parties. And then eventually I registered Green Party because I came to understand that the you have to have a certain percentage of the population to be registered as your party for your parties to be able to come to the ballot. I don't know all the proper terminology for that. So I thought, well, I may not be like this crazy person who's going to throw herself at the side of a boat so they don't harpoon a whale, but I will definitely not want this excluded, because the true natural part of me that came up was my inner shamanism, the part of me that relates to the consciousness that's in everything, as well as every person, every animal, every element. And that is like, that is my politics, if you will, is this whole idea that there is a way to get along. Nature does it. I think we could work it out too. I'm highly idealistic. I embrace things from libertarianism and all the others that you spoke of. Did I go over my 3 minutes? And I'm going to stop now. But I didn't even think I'd fill up 3 minutes. And there you go. That's the beginning of me.
Thank you. Yeah, and I know the 3 minutes just flies by so fast when you're the one actually sharing the story, because there's so much to share. Okay, well, I guess I'll start with my 1 minute reflection. Yeah, I of course connect very much with you with your green heart, because when I found the Green Party, I just remember falling in love with the Green Party's, I think back then it was 10 values. I don't know if it still is. But and it's, yeah, things like sustainability and a love for humanity and all that stuff. It's so weird because I feel like these days, I think back then it was called, they said social justice, but I feel like these days social justice means something different. Like back in the early 90s and 2000s, social justice meant something different from how it feels. The feeling of it is much more angry and canceling now than it was back then, which is more of a Martin Luther King kind of like, we're all together social justice. That's the kind of social justice warrior I want to be, not the ones today canceling people on Twitter. But sorry, I guess now I'm getting maybe too political about it. But thank you, Mara, for sharing that heart. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and Dylan, any reflections or questions?
Yeah, it's, well, one is just, it's lovely to see that both of you come from Republican backgrounds, which is of course the opposite to where I came from. And it's I remember in second grade asking my teacher when the elections were happening, I raised my hand and said, how do you know if you're a Democrat or a Republican? And she laughed. I'll never forget the moment. She said, well, I guess at your age, it's still basically what your parents are.
That's
And
that's a pretty wise answer.
we're still Facebook friends to this day. She's a lovely woman. It's just beautiful to see the journeys that people are on, and to know that, and to see and to share our journeys of change and evolution. And it gives me also hope on a larger pattern that we can, and to continue to remind ourselves for ourselves and about each other, that this too shall evolve. Like our views individually and collectively can and hopefully will continue to evolve and to mature and to ask new questions like we're doing now. I
Yeah.
think it is so crucial. So it was lovely to see that in the beginnings of that in your story, Mara.
Yeah, it's wonderful. That's a great motto. This too shall evolve. Maybe that'll become the motto of of the show. I appreciate that. Certainly of the first dozen episodes. Thank you both. I really, and I know there's more, and we're going to have another segment where you each get to share more about your story or reflections. I want to right now share with you all and the audience the draft of the Mindful Politics, sort of like the values of the show, and suggested format for the more controversial format of the show coming up in next year. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm not going to take a whole lot of time, not too much time, because I still want to hear from each of your stories. But I just want to go through certain parts of it, and I welcome kind of more open-ended conversation at this point. And in fact, I'm going to set a timer for all of us here. So we'll go for about, let's say 5 minutes actually, to kind of go through this particular segment. So I'm going to share my screen now, and there you are. Do you all see the screen? Yeah, see that? Okay. So let's talk a bit about the values, and I want to hear your questions or additions or whatever you want to share. Okay, so I thought about 3 values. Number 1 is humility. As those of you watching the video version can see what's on the screen here. Humility is, in my opinion, is the key to civility. And each participant of a Mindful Politics conversation is encouraged to generously apply these postures. I'm still sorting this one out. What are your thoughts? Okay, so that's, and then second, I know there's so much more I need to learn, and that's true for me. Or sometimes it's going to be, especially when we're talking about issues, like, no, you're right, that's interesting, I hadn't thought of that before, hadn't seen that before, thank you. I really am coming to this from I don't really know. Like I said, I'm if someone says, what are you politically? I'm confused and homeless politically, because I don't really side squarely with either end of the spectrum. So do either of you have any quick thoughts or questions, or let me keep going with all this, and just for the sake of time, and then I'd love to have each of your thoughts on this. Second one, appreciation. The idea of truth being a mosaic, meaning everybody has something to contribute to what we might call objective truth. Objective truth literally means it's objective, it's true for everybody. Well, if it's true for everybody, it means everybody has some piece of it, right? Some piece of, it's like the old elephant story. It's like blind people around an elephant. One person said, no, this is a wall. Another person feeling the tail of the elephant, no, this is a snake. Another person feeling the trunk of the elephant, no, this is a tree, right? It's like, no, we all have a piece. And so can we talk about the pieces that are unique to us, that the other side might go, wow, I never thought of it that way, or I never understood why you all thought this, kind of thing. So that's the appreciation part. And then the togetherness part, again, my optimism, idealism is that kind of Martin Luther King-esque feel of, we shall overcome. We're all together here? Why do we have to fight each other? Or maybe the Rodney King. Why can't we all just get along? Like why do we have to fight? Why can't we just come together and say we're all humans, we love each other? Hippie, right? We all love each other, and I know we have different experiences and views. Let's learn and let's come together and have a togetherness feeling about moving forward. So that's either of you have thoughts on these three idealistic views?
I'm wanting you to unpin me because I think I'm still pinned.
Oh no, we're
Oh,
actually
okay, all right.
yeah,
I was like
just for the
worried
sake of
that was being recorded. I didn't
no
want to
worries.
interrupt you.
Yeah, no, thank you for
Okay.
that. Thank you.
No, this is good. This is really, really good. And I think that it's difficult because when we're idealistic, and I'll own that. Maybe I'm in the idealistic party. I don't know. But that it gives us uh, a place of real vulnerability to be attacked by folks that feel righteous about their position, just as idealistic people may attack righteous folks. So in watching some of the episodes that you shared with us in the links, there were links there in our proposed materials to kind of take a look at. I noticed that when what they call it, the middle ground one, I noticed that they did a good job of editing where people could say strong statements, and even sometimes there was confrontive statements, but they still they kept that peak of push out. They didn't let that become the hijacker of the purpose of the whole bringing everyone together.
Thank you for that. Yeah, Dylan, how about you?
So with my work being centered around embodiment and increasingly around affect and emotion states, I've spent, I think, the last 2 or 3 years really researching and developing practices around working with primary emotions versus socio-moral emotions. And primary emotions are just to set a context. So primary emotions are like very, very core to periphery. Like, I want that, I don't like that, I'm scared of that, I'm mad at that, right? It's very me, immediate here to there relationship, so to speak. Yeah. Whereas socio-moral emotions happen and arise in a larger frame or context of the way, for whatever reasons, personally, culturally, socially, all those influences, that through which I interpret my actions and your actions, which may have varying degrees of overlap with your frame or the other's frames, right, of what is right and wrong, what is bad and good, right? And so when we have these two interacting sets of my own immediate personal emotions, my socio-moral emotions about what's bad and good, which is eliciting, socio-moral emotions are like, so your shame, pride, resentment, guilt, righteous anger, versus the more positive ones, right, of respect, empathy, and then the higher arousal ones of pride, joy, significance, right? You could say, just in the nervous system, righteous anger is diametrically opposed to empathy.
That's interesting.
Yeah. That's
And
that's the
you already
problem.
brought up, though. I was happy to hear you bring up righteous anger, and I've been working with people
actually,
for the
I'm sorry,
last 2
Dylan,
years.
to interrupt you here. Actually, I want to go into this segment now where each of us gets 3 more minutes to kind of reflect, and I feel like you could complete your thought there, because
Perfect.
I would love to. I would love that. Okay, yeah. So let's continue there. So yeah, go ahead. You were saying, right? Yeah.
Oh, so this is now okay. Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
So those words again were humility. What was the second one?
Appreciation,
Appreciation,
and togetherness. Yeah.
It's almost like a 3-step program. Now, if I can first cultivate humility, that sets the ground for me to be open for empathy. They talk a lot about that in the sort of moral emotions and virtues literature, that humility is a prerequisite to empathy. However, when I perceive that a lot is at stake, and the more socioeconomically fraught the country and my conditions are, the more triggered I am, right? The more distress I have in my system, the more fear, the more anger, however I'm or despair, wherever I'm going with that, right? And then drop that into my political context, which is just being, like irritated 24/7 by our devices, and that gets ginned up into more righteous anger. That is like antithetical to being available for humility and thus step into some empathy. So like how can we in our education systems, like I feel like emotional intelligence and social emotional intelligence in our education system is like, without that, I don't think that we have anywhere near the requisite socio-emotional training to handle the types of socio-emotional challenges that our current predicament presents us with.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
Because it's a skill to do what you're saying, right? It's
Yeah,
hard when a
it
lot is
is.
at stake.
Yeah.
And I'm pissed off at a lot of things. And it's
Yeah.
hard to self-regulate that, to even become available energetically to really listen to you, let alone like
Yeah.
put myself in your shoes.
So appreciative of that.
Yeah.
I'll
I'll stop there.
I'll
Unless you
give
have a
you some
follow-up
more time
question.
later too, but I want to give Mara a chance to share if you want to, Mara, at this point.
Well, I think Dylan's really driven down to the heart of my despair on politics and why I've seen the big picture, cried, and then stepped back. I lived in La Mesa, I still do, and we had the riots back in 2020. And it was terrifying and scary to see. And both sides were so polarized. They were so clear they were right. There was a lot of that righteous anger feeling. And what percentage of those people have had any education around these topics and how to work with their own emotional body? Very few, very few. It's almost privileged and elitist to even talk about it, right? So because I spend a lot of time listening to other people and what's going on, I've discovered that letting people express and giving them a lot of space to say what they need to say, encourage them, say it's not about right or wrong, you just need to move this energy, that helps folks that don't have the time or the patience or the even inkling of awareness that educational intelligence or emotional intelligence education is necessary. It just gives them a process to be able to start moving things. And so I end up assisting people in processes so they can get to hopefully a place where they can be available to see, well, what is possible if I move all this energy that's between me and my mom? Let's say moms are always a big thing, right? If I move this energy between me and my mom, and then weirdly mom changes, this is the kind of thing I've seen at the one-on-one level that I'm hoping is going to be perhaps the workaround this absence of even interest in emotional intelligence right now.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I want to give each of you a bit more time shortly. I just wanted to also share that I love this conversation. This is so, I wish this could be, required conversation. Not that my podcast is required listening. I have maybe a bit of humility in this, but I wish that this conversation about emotional intelligence and sort of like the relationship to our emotions and the socio-emotional thing that you're saying, Dylan, like I wish that were in the education system, but it's not. I mean, I remember the only thing I remember learning in elementary school about emotions, or I remember they had puppets. Like this puppet is the aggressive alligator, passive piggy, and then assertive Aaron or something like that. Like they're teaching us about passive aggressive and assertive. That's the only emotional training I had in elementary school. And it's like we have to figure everything out. It's like no wonder so many personal relationships are, let alone political. It's like political multiplies the inadequacies we have about personal relationships a million times, and I feel like the news media has so much culpability in this, all sides. Like they have no yeah, they don't of course they want to stoke up the anger, the righteous anger, so that people keep watching, or the horror about what the other side is doing or thinking. And social media, the danger of being, as I've built my business and my audience, I get more and scared over time about being canceled, these days, right? And so in fact, there is a whole episode that I recorded on my YouTube channel, and I think I might have shared this in my own personal podcast, about why I don't talk about politics. I recorded this. I don't remember, like I recorded this at the start of the Ukraine war, actually, because that was like everything. Everyone's talking about that. It just took up all the airspace. I'm like, this is why. And people go, I'm not anymore. People used to say, George, why didn't you mention that there was just another school shooting? Or why didn't, why aren't you, as a public figure of some kind, of, in my little circle, why don't you talk about the fact that the abortion ruling just went through? Like, come on, like, you're being callous and your voice is not being heard. You're not contributing to the voice, and of course, everyone assumes, for example, my circle's abortion issue, you have to be, aghast at the abortion ruling. That's the proper way of expressing the opinion. If you're expressing the other opinion, you get canceled, right? Not that I would. I'm not sure. Again, like, I don't know. It's like, but anyway, that my time is up, and I just want to say thank you both for kind of holding space, and all of you here listening for engaging in this dialogue, because I am coming out of the closet politically, I guess, with much trepidation. Okay, I want to give, if either of you, both of you, have another minute, wanted to share kind of final remarks as we complete. Either of you want to do that? Both of you, please.
I had one more sort of follow-up thought or aspect to this emotional thing that I wanted to bring in, just that it's sort of in that collection of thoughts. And it's particularly about the distress affect, right? Which is like, this is not okay, and there's a feeling of urgency around it, right? Which is like, describes a lot of our experience of the world right now. So there's a lot of distress, right? And either we feel like that sense of activation or that sense of collapse, right? And despair and disempowerment. So we're just dealing with a lot of that. And I train healthcare providers in dealing with this. So it's also the space that I'm in all day long. And what was it that I kind of forgot what I was gonna, is that one thing is I've been really leaning into the question of how can we educate ourselves and train ourselves to dance gracefully and meaningfully in a purposeful and empowering way with the full spectrum of emotions. It's really struck me that the dominant, seems to be sort of underlying dominant frame for emotions is that distress emotions should be calmed and dispelled. That in the sort of more green Carl Rogers bed of humanist psychology, that there is a strong bias towards quelling and calming the distressed emotions. Go meditate, mindfulness, these types of things are the order of the day. In schools, regulate those rowdy children. And yet there is, when you look at like the social justice movement, it's there for a reason, because they know that these issues matter, and they're rightfully angry. They're righteously angry, and there can be an over-identified, but they're rightfully angry. And so, but part of the importance of emotional education is to find ways for anger and fear and guilt and righteous anger to be handled, to be honored, to be handled skillfully, not to just be meditated upon. Oh, go sit with it. Oh, go dispel it. Oh, go do your yoga. Like, how can that have a place?
Yeah.
And like, even in the forum of this kind of a conversation, and you seeding, like, let's have more of these kind of conversations.
Yeah.
Like, how can we give voice to our strong opinions and to our strong sense
Yeah.
of urgency
That's
in a way
right.
that is constructive? I think it's one of the really, and that we can also take, put that part of us over here and really be present to the other person's
Yeah.
urgencies and,
That's
and
right.
experiences.
I appreciate that very much. You mentioned green. Do you mean like the spiral dynamics green or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
else?
Spiral
Okay.
dynamics, green level, sort of the
Oh yeah. That's a
postmodern
whole other
pluralist.
conversation. It's so
Yeah,
fascinating that to bring
yeah,
anyway, but thank you for mentioning it.
yeah.
Mara, any kind of closing remarks?
Well, I think I kind of want to build a little bit on what Dylan was saying about how we treat what we call the shadow emotions, and that they should be
Mm-hmm.
regulated or as you said, dispelled or qualmed, you know. And I'm really about moving through and expressing and allowing that evolution, that transformation of energy. So we don't have these giant piles of political poop we keep stepping into and getting canceled, you know, and there's an innocence to some of this. You know, it's such a vast realm of concepts, languaging, and and unintentional blaming. I think sometimes our judgments result in a blaming that we didn't even realize we were doing, or we took something as personally that really wasn't about us. So there's a lot of that again revolves around this whole emotional intelligence idea, and I think that that's just key and core to finding these solutions we're looking for.
Mm, thank you for that. Thank you. Well, this has been an amazing experience to be with the both of you. I would love the audience's feedback. What did you get from this episode? Any ideas that you're looking forward to pursuing? Something that one of the guests talked about that you want to look further into or reflect for yourself? Do you have any questions that this raises for you? There are links to the guests, whatever website or social media they would like to share in the episode notes. So feel free to connect with their work. And like I said, this is a collaborative effort in terms of how the show is evolving. So please do give me your feedback on how this was and any suggestions for the show format going forward. I'm recording this in the September of 2022, September 10th, in fact, 2022. This is probably not going to be released until November or December. So your feedback it's still valuable for the future episodes, but just so you know, I am listening and I'm adjusting things for the future. So thank you all so much. Mara and Dylan, so appreciate your presence here. Please do stay after the recording. I just want to check in with you and see you all in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.